Hi, AP. Welcome to your first work back from break. We are going to be going over buttons and inputs today, which I'm really excited about. These are just an alternative to some of the other ways that we found interactivity in our programs that utilize HTML pieces in our JavaScript in order to work. So a lot of the design and the functionality is going to be taken care of for us, but they are things that require us to use something called a callback function, which we are going to be seeing shortly. So please make sure that you have opened up a brand new editor. It is okay that Collide is not linked, just whatever editor you have. And it's been a while since we've just started fresh. So remember to give it a name that makes sense to you. Mine right now is called Dirt Almanac. Give it a better name than Dirt Almanac. Calling it like 1.3.0 buttons and inputs might be smart, or just something where you'll remember where your notes are. Make sure you also go to the top and hit save to make sure this is stuck in your account. And let's get going. Please make sure that your YouTube video is on one half of your screen and your code editor is on the other so you can follow along. And remember that you can always pause, slow down, rewatch anything that you need to. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So let me make my text nice and big so that you can see what I'm doing. The first thing that we are going to do is make an input box, and that input box is going to be awesome but super useless until we make a button. So let's go ahead and see how we do this. Making an input involves making a variable, and because this variable needs to exist in several places, it needs to be given some stuff in setup, and it needs to do some actions in draw, we are going to make this a global variable at the top of our screen. So I'm going to put in I'm just going to call it input1 as my variable name. Please remember that variable names, as you guys know, can be super arbitrary, but it should relate to what you are doing in some way. And input1 makes sense if I were going to make multiple inputs, which maybe y'all are. I am then going to go ahead and click inside my setup function, and I'm going to start creating this input. So to make a new input, I start with my variable, and I tell it that that variable is going to hold a new input. And I do that with the function create input. It's a function, it has the curly braces after it, and those curly braces do not need to take anything in, but they can take in a string, and that string is going to be what displays in my input box. So I'm going to type here, I guess, and I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And you guys should see that now beneath my canvas at the bottom of the screen, there's a little box that says type here, and if I click into it, I can type whatever I want. But it doesn't really do anything yet. You guys can also play with if I change type here to right here. When I hit play again, now that will be what displays my input box. So whatever goes between these quotations, that's what shows up in your input box. And this is a wonderful thing for you guys to take some notes on, maybe get it down as a code comment, that is what this line of code is doing, because you'll probably want to use this again later. Just an idea. Once we have that, I'm going to jump down a line, and I am going to try and move my input box, because right now it's at the bottom of my canvas, and that's fine, but I can see on my screen that my little box is going to get in the way of that. So to move this, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to call my variable, and I'm going to say input1.position, and then I'm going to give it two more numbers. This dot in a word is a method very much like a string method. This is a method that just works on inputs in particular, and also on buttons. On a lot of HTML elements is what we're going to see, but it lets us type in coordinates of where we would like to move our box to. So I'm just going to move it to 2020, so it's in this top corner up here. You can try putting in any coordinates you want. This is another great thing to just pause on and play and see what shows up. But it now bounces up to the top, nice and cute. So then I am going to try and make my button, I guess. I think it's also worth noting that right now this input is a default size. There is an option of input1.size that takes in a number, or maybe two numbers. It might take in two values to control how big that the input box is. In nums for size of box. I'm not going to mess with that now because I like the size of this input box, but I do just want you guys to know, in your work you also have links to inputs and buttons on the reference sheet, and if there's more you'd like to do with these, that would be your starting place. So let's go ahead and make my button. My button is going to follow the same pattern. Up at the top, I'm going to say let button1 That's going to be my variable name that holds this button. And again, I could give it a better name if I knew what my button was doing so far. Right now, I don't know what it's doing yet, so we'll just hold it. And then down here, I'm going to start making all the stuff for my button. So button 1 is equal to create button, very much like create input. And again, very similar, create button doesn't need anything inside it, but it would like to have a string to say something. It could say like press me if I wanted to. And you'll see when I hit play, it shows up at the bottom of my canvas. If I want to move it further up, I could use that dot position method where I move it somewhere. So I'm going to move it to, let's say like 100 on the X and 20 on the Y. I'm going to try and get it to sit next to this input box. Oh, it looks like it's next to it, but it's maybe cutting it off. So let's move this over a little bit. I'm going to change that 100 to 150. Much better. Maybe I even try like 160, 170. I just want like a little gap between them, you know? I'm going to mess with these numbers for a while. All right, there we go. So now I have my little gap. I have my box. This looks nice. I'm going to stop messing with it now. Where this button is will not change how it functions. It does not need to be next to this input in order to work correctly. But because I'm thinking about other people using my program, I might want it next to that input box, or maybe like right beneath the input box, or like somewhere nearby that input box, so that I understand that they go together. So just, you know, things to think about as you're working. So now I can type in this box, and I have this button that when I hover on it, it changes color, and I can press it as much as I want. But right now it doesn't do anything when it's pressed, and that's kind of useless as well. So the last thing we need to do is we are eventually, and I'm going to type this in, comment it out, I'm going to leave it commented out, we're going to comment it in later. We are going to teach the computer what should happen when I click the mouse on button 1. And that is always going to look like button 1 dot mouse pressed, and then these parentheses. Now here's like kind of the tricky thing for you guys. The thing that goes inside these parentheses is not going to be a number or a string or a boolean. It's going to be a function that I want to have run when the button is pressed. This is something called a callback function because it is only being called when a certain event occurs. It's not something like ellipse that you're putting in draw that's just always running in the draw function. It is being called on when you press the button. So to make this happen, we need to write a function, which I'm going to do at the very bottom of the screen. So I'm going underneath setup, underneath draw, outside all the curly brackets. I'm going to make a function called greet user. And I'm going to camel case it because otherwise it's going to bother me, and I know I'm going to typo it. And I'm just going to set up all my syntax. So I have my parentheses and I have these guys. In this particular callback function, it's going to be a little funny. Even though it's taking data from the input, it does not need to pass that data through here because input is a global variable and because this is operating as a callback function. Callback functions have a lot of nuance and things that we are not going super deep into this year, but that you will be seeing to utilize, and just in this moment know that this is a time when we do not have to pass that value. We can still use the value inside what we are doing. So I'm just going to make a super basic function that is going to give an alert message that is going to say hello, and it's going to say hello combined with whatever value is inside of that input right now. So to do that, I'm going to say plus input 1 dot value and then some parentheses. This input 1 dot value, this is going to suck out whatever I've typed in my input at the moment I press my button, and it's going to return it back to the program. Now, the last thing that I need to do here is I need to stick this greet user function inside my button 1 dot mouse pressed, which is all the way up in setup. So inside of here, I am going to write greet user, and notice there are no parentheses this time. When I'm using a callback function, I am just calling the name of the function. I am not adding the parentheses to it. The computer is going to go seek it out and figure out that it is a function for me. So now I'm going to hit play. I'm going to type in my name. I'm going to hit press me, and I should get a pop-up that says hello Courtney, which is super awesome and